Hello and welcome back. My name is Dean Shatley. I'm here with my colleague Ashley Leonard, and welcome to the Title IX training series. This is section 2, the North Carolina School Board Association Model Policy section. And so this section is designed specifically for districts who have adopted either the model policy from the School Boards Association in whole or taken some portion of that. We are just going to highlight some of the issues in the policy and talk about the newer policies that they put out to the whole policy changes that you went through. If your district does not subscribe to the North Carolina School Board Association policy manual, you can skip this section if you would like. But otherwise, let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who's going to go through this presentation.
Thanks, Dean. Like Dean said, we wanted to include this section just because there have been a number of changes that the School Board Association has put out based on the Title IX regulations, and a number of changes to other existing School Board Association model policies to comply with the new Title IX regulations. So this is just going to be a quick overview of what's new, what's updated, what's been removed, the rationale behind it, and a few key differences that we are advising clients on from the School Board Association model policy. So there are 6 new policies that the School Board Association has put out as model policies and 1 regulation. The regulation are Title IX sexual harassment definitions. So if you watched our first section on key Title IX fundamentals, then you know that we've talked about words like complainant and respondent and sexual harassment and education program and activity. All of those terms are defined in the School Board Association's regulation on Title IX sexual harassment definitions. The other new policies that they've put out are discrimination and harassment prohibited by federal law, which is all other types of discrimination and harassment, not including Title IX. Title IX non-discrimination on the basis of sex is your non-discrimination statement that the Title IX regulations require that you put in a policy. Title IX sexual harassment, prohibited conduct and reporting process. This one is bolded, as is the Title IX sexual harassment grievance process, because these are the 2 policies that we really track in our remaining training videos to describe how people report alleged Title IX misconduct, districts' responsibilities in responding to reports. And then the grievance process is when you receive a formal complaint, go through a formal investigation or informal resolution, all the way up to a formal determination. So that's why those 2 are bolded, because those are the 2 that we really focus on in our remaining training videos. And then bullying and harassing behavior prohibited. That is a new policy that also replaces a part of an old policy, and we'll get into that in just a second. And then finally, discrimination and harassment in the workplace is your Title VII policy. So any non-Title IX conduct would fall under the discrimination and harassment in the workplace policy. So the School Board Association has stated that 3 of the new policies implement Title IX obligations, 2 address the board's obligations under other federal non-discrimination laws like Title VII or the ADA. And then the 1 policy, bullying and harassment, has been made to address the board's obligation under state law. And this is just a chart, and you all will receive this PowerPoint, so it's not like you have to write all of this down right now. But these notes next to each new policy describes what the policy does and some additional requirements that districts need to keep in mind. For example, the Title IX non-discrimination on the basis of sex Certain elements of that policy must be posted online on districts' websites in addition to student and employee handbooks. The School Board Association has also updated several policies and repealed 2 policies. As you can see here, another fancy chart, the non-discrimination on the basis of disabilities in the staff-student relations model policies are updated to refer to the new policies and make cross-references. So nothing substantive in those changes. The assault, threats, and harassment policy has been updated to remove harassment from the title and remove harassment and cyberbullying provisions because those topics are more thoroughly addressed in the new board policies on bullying and harassment. The school level investigations model policy makes necessary changes to be consistent with the new Title IX policies because under the Title IX regulations, your investigations will be different from other investigations that you do at the school level. And then 2 policies that have been repealed: prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying, and discrimination, harassment, and bullying complaint procedure. Again, those have been superseded by the new policies. So with all these policy changes, what are the practical effects that school districts need to know? The main thing is that reporting, investigating, and decision-making is no longer a uniform process for each type of report, unfortunately. Under Title IX, you may only investigate and resolve formal complaints that meet the definition of sexual harassment for you to use your Title IX grievance process. So what that means is if something doesn't meet the definition of a Title IX violation, it could possibly meet the definition of a Title VII violation or a PDA violation or bullying or cyberbullying, and that will be contained in other policies that your board adopts. But the definition of sexual harassment under Title IX must be investigated or resolved under your new Title IX policy. Also keep in mind that the definition of sexual harassment under Title IX is different than under the federal law that prohibits sexual harassment and employment. And we talked about this a little bit before, but that federal law is commonly known as Title VII that prohibits sexual harassment and other sex-based discrimination in employment only. So some conduct that does not violate Title IX may constitute sexual harassment under Title VII.
Actually, I want to point out here something that you indicated in the first bullet about having a uniform investigation and due process is no longer possible. In the past, when the Department of Education originally came out with Title IX guidance back, I think, in 2011, and we covered this a little bit in Section 1, that guidance kind of dictated how we did an investigation and how we went through the process. And although it was a little more onerous than what we normally probably would have done in any discrimination or harassment process, we aligned that process with other forms of discrimination investigations too, whether it was disability discrimination or racial discrimination. We tried to lump them all together, meeting the Title IX guidance just to make it uniform, make it easier and more efficient. But now the Title IX guidance, as Title IX rules and regulations, have become quite extensive. It's no longer efficient to follow that policy for claims, other claims, such as racial discrimination or religious discrimination or disability discrimination or harassment. And so keep that in mind. And then lastly, there are times, again, and we mentioned this in Section 1, there are times when you will have discrimination under Title IX or even under Title VII that it will not be about sexual harassment, it will just be some form of sexual discrimination where we do not follow the Title IX policies and procedures, although it is still related to sexual discrimination, because there are a lot more, the spectrum of sexual discrimination is much broader than just the new definition of sexual harassment.
right? So an example of that, Dean, would be under Title IX, generally, pregnancy discrimination is prohibited, uh, but under the new Title IX regulations, the Department of Education doesn't consider pregnancy discrimination to be sexual harassment. So you would look at pregnancy discrimination under Title VII and your discrimination and harassment in the workplace policy.
Absolutely. And another example relating to students potentially would be um, discrimination in athletics. It's not necessarily related to harassment, such as does a women's varsity basketball team receive equal and equitable benefits and resources as the men's teams in the school, or potentially even if a teacher, the allegation was that a teacher always gives the girls better grades than the boys in the classroom. Again, sex discrimination go either way. And so that's certainly not based on sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, but it is discrimination potentially based on sex. And so that would follow under your other discrimination investigation processes and not the Title IX sexual harassment process too. So a lot to parse through and a lot to think through as the
So this chart goes through the new policies that the School Board Association has put out. And as you can see, it lays out whose conduct is prohibited, who is protected, what categories of individuals or groups are protected, who can make a report, who can file a complaint, what triggers an investigation, whether appeals are allowed, and then some notes for you to make note of. I won't go through all of these, but again, we're going to be focusing on the Title IX sexual harassment, prohibited conduct, and reporting process model policy, and the Title IX sexual harassment grievance process model policy. And what you should note about these two policies are the prohibited conduct and reporting process takes you from someone wants to make a report of alleged Title IX conduct or Title IX misconduct up to the Title IX coordinator determining that formal complaint will go forward or a complainant filing a formal complaint. Once a formal complaint is filed, the grievance process policy, that 1726, takes over and goes from a formal complaint through an investigation, a determination, and an appeal. So that's how the School Board Association has separated those two policies out. And one thing of note in the School Board Association's model policy 1726, and this is the Title IX sexual harassment grievance process policy. It's important to keep in mind that Title IX does not require live hearings in K-12 settings. So you might have heard a whole bunch about live hearing requirements. That is for higher education institutions only. The Department of Education has not mandated K-12 settings to require live hearings. The School Board Association's model policy gives an option of a live hearing under Title IX when the respondent is a student. So if you have a student on student formal complaint or an employee on student formal complaint or a third party who's attempting to participate in an education program or activity is making a formal complaint against a student, in any of those cases, the School Board Association model policy says either party has an opportunity to request a Title IX live hearing. We have been working, as a firm, we have been working on revisions to this policy because a Title IX live hearing is not required by federal regulation. We are working to revise policy 1726 so that a Title IX live hearing isn't required or possible. Our revisions align more with giving the students and employees the due process that they're owed under state law after an investigation and a determination is made. So if a hearing under state law is required, such as for a long-term suspension, an expulsion, or dismissal of a career status teacher, then those hearings will happen at the end of the process as opposed to the beginning.
And we've included our policy revisions or revisions to the model policy, excuse me, in the file with all the videos too. So there isn't a right or wrong answer here to have a Title IX live hearing requirement or an opportunity for a live hearing in the Title IX process. There's pros and cons, and we'll certainly dive into some of those later on in some of the later sections. But for the most part, there's no right or wrong answer here. What I will say is that if you've adopted the North Carolina School Board Association model policy without any changes, then you have the live hearing option inside of the policy. And if you want to remove that option, it will require an amendment by your board. So just keep that in mind as you move forward.
And for those of you that have adopted the model policy, the 1726, our later training videos include trainings on live hearings under Title IX, because if you do provide live hearings, even though they're not required, if you provide them under Title IX, you must be trained in certain areas. And so our later training videos focus on those live hearings. And that concludes Section 2 on the North Carolina School Board Association's model policies.
That was an easy one, actually. I don't think the rest of it will be that short, unfortunately. So thank you very much, and we'll be back with Section 3.